"Do you know who you just stopped?" The question had not been asked yet, but it was the question that would change everything about that quiet morning on a Virginia highway. The road stretched beneath a clear blue sky, with cars passing through the peaceful streets outside a small suburban community. For most people driving through that area, it was just another ordinary day. But for one man sitting behind the wheel of a simple vehicle, an ordinary traffic stop was about to become a moment that revealed the difference between appearance and truth. General Marcus Caldwell had never needed attention. After more than 3 decades of service in the United States Army, he had learned that true leadership was not about being recognized in every room he entered. It was about responsibility, discipline, and the ability to remain calm when others were not. On that morning, Marcus was not wearing a military uniform. He was not surrounded by officials. He was not carrying anything that announced his rank or his history. He was simply a man driving through Virginia, enjoying a quiet moment away from the responsibilities that had defined most of his life. Then came the flashing lights behind him. Officer Ryan Mitchell approached the vehicle with the confidence of someone who believed he understood the situation before it was fully explained. He had spent years as a police officer and trusted his instincts. To him, every traffic stop was about control, observation, and following procedure. But sometimes, the first impression creates a story that is not true. Ryan looked at Marcus and saw only what was visible in that moment. He did not see the years of service. He did not see the leadership responsibilities. He did not see the countless decisions Marcus had made while carrying the trust of thousands of people. He only saw a driver on the side of the road. Marcus lowered the window and greeted the officer respectfully. His voice was calm. His attitude was cooperative. There was no argument, no frustration, and no attempt to use his position to change the situation. "Good morning, officer," Marcus said. "How can I help you?" Those simple words revealed something Ryan did not expect. The man in front of him was not trying to prove his importance. He was simply showing the same discipline he had carried throughout his entire life. As the conversation continued, Ryan began asking questions. Some were routine. Others carried assumptions that Marcus immediately noticed. The general understood that the situation was no longer only about a traffic stop. It was about whether someone would take the time to see the person behind the moment. Marcus had faced difficult challenges before, but he had learned that patience was often more powerful than confrontation. He knew who he was. He knew what he had accomplished. And he knew that the truth did not need to be announced loudly to exist. What Ryan did not know was that the quiet driver sitting in front of him was not just another person on the road. He was a respected Army leader whose name carried decades of service and dedication. But before that truth could be revealed, Marcus would have to experience something far more common than anyone wanted to admit: being judged before being understood. Marcus Caldwell had spent most of his life understanding one important lesson: a person's true character was revealed when nobody was watching. Long before he became a respected Army general, he was simply a young man learning the meaning of responsibility, discipline, and service. Those values followed him through every chapter of his life and remained with him even after reaching the highest levels of military leadership. Yet, on that quiet Virginia road, none of those years were visible. There was no ceremony, no military formation, no audience recognizing his accomplishments. There was only a man sitting calmly in his vehicle while Officer Ryan Mitchell stood beside the road asking questions. Marcus understood that people often made decisions based on what they could see in a few seconds. He had witnessed it many times throughout his career. A person could look at a situation and believe they understood the entire story, while missing the details that truly mattered. Ryan continued the traffic stop, following his usual process. He asked for information and reviewed the details provided by Marcus. The general responded respectfully, answering each question without hesitation. He did not mention his rank. He did not explain his years of service. He did not say anything that would suggest he deserved different treatment. For Marcus, respect was not something that came from a title. It came from how people treated each other. As the conversation continued, Ryan remained focused on the situation in front of him. He believed he was simply doing his job. He had handled countless traffic stops before, and experience had taught him to pay attention to details. But experience could also create habits, and habits could sometimes make people overlook the human being standing in front of them. Marcus noticed the difference between being questioned and being understood. He had no problem with questions. In fact, his entire career had been built on asking the right questions before making important decisions. What concerned him was the feeling that the conclusion had already been created before the facts were known. The general looked out toward the road ahead and remembered the early years of his military career. He remembered learning that leadership was not about having the loudest voice. It was about listening carefully, staying composed, and making decisions based on truth rather than assumptions. Those lessons had guided him through decades of service. They had helped him lead soldiers, support communities, and carry responsibilities that most people would never see. But now, in a simple moment on a Virginia highway, he faced a different kind of challenge. It was not about strategy or command. It was about patience. It was about allowing someone else the opportunity to discover the truth without forcing it upon them. Ryan looked at Marcus and saw an ordinary driver. He did not see the years behind that calm expression. He did not see the sacrifices that shaped the man sitting in front of him. He did not know that Marcus had spent a lifetime serving a country that valued dedication and commitment. The general remained silent, knowing that time had a way of revealing what assumptions could hide. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not announced at the beginning. Sometimes they wait quietly until the right moment arrives. Marcus Caldwell had learned throughout his life that leadership was not measured by how many people knew your name. It was measured by the choices you made when nobody was paying attention. That belief had guided him from his earliest days in the United States Army to the moment he became a respected general. But as he sat beside the road in Virginia, waiting during a routine traffic stop, he found himself facing a situation that required a different kind of leadership. Not the kind that involved making decisions in a command center or guiding soldiers through complex missions. This was a quieter challenge. It required patience, understanding, and the ability to remain calm when someone else had already formed an opinion. Officer Ryan Mitchell continued reviewing the information in front of him. From his perspective, he was simply following procedure. He believed every person had to answer questions the same way, and he took pride in being thorough. But what Ryan did not realize was that the way a person asks questions can reveal just as much as the answers they receive. Marcus noticed the tone. He noticed the hesitation. He noticed that Ryan was not only trying to understand the situation but also trying to confirm what he already believed. The general had experienced moments like this before, though rarely in such a personal way. Throughout his military career, he had seen how quickly assumptions could influence decisions. He had taught younger leaders that the strongest commanders were not the ones who spoke first. They were the ones who listened carefully before acting. Those lessons were not just military principles. They were life principles. Marcus looked at the road ahead and remembered the young soldier he had once been. Decades earlier, he had entered military service with a simple belief. If you wanted to lead others, you first had to understand them. He spent years building trust with people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and different parts of the country. He learned that every person carried a story that was impossible to see from the outside. That lesson stayed with him long after he earned his highest rank. Ryan, however, only saw the current moment. He saw a driver during a traffic stop. He did not see the decades of service behind the calm expression. He did not see the leadership responsibilities Marcus had carried. He did not see the thousands of hours spent making decisions that affected the lives of others. To Ryan, the situation was simple. To Marcus, it represented something much larger. It represented the importance of being willing to look beyond the surface. A few minutes passed as the morning traffic continued moving around them. People drove by without knowing the significance of the moment taking place on that roadside. They could not see that one person was carrying a lifetime of service while another person was about to learn a lesson about judgment and understanding. Marcus remained respectful because he knew anger would not reveal the truth faster. He knew that dignity was not something given by another person. It was something a person carried within themselves. And while Ryan continued searching for answers, he had no idea that the information he was about to discover would completely change the way he viewed the man standing in front of him. The morning continued quietly along the Virginia highway, but the situation between Marcus Caldwell and Officer Ryan Mitchell was becoming more complicated with every passing minute. What began as a routine traffic stop had slowly transformed into a moment where assumptions and reality were moving in completely different directions. Marcus remained composed inside his vehicle, answering every question with patience and respect. He understood that the situation was not only about the traffic stop anymore. It was about the importance of being seen as a person before being judged by circumstances. Officer Mitchell looked over the information again, trying to understand why certain details did not match the conclusion he had expected. He had dealt with many situations during his years in law enforcement, and he believed confidence came from experience. But experience could sometimes create a dangerous habit, believing that the first explanation was always the correct one. Marcus noticed the change in the officer's expression. He could tell that Ryan was beginning to recognize that the situation was not as simple as it first appeared. However, Marcus did not rush to explain who he was. He did not mention his rank. He did not talk about the years he spent serving the country. He believed that respect gained through explanation was different from respect earned through character. During his military career, Marcus had learned that leaders were not defined by the titles attached to their names. They were defined by how they treated people when they had the most authority. That lesson stayed with him throughout his life. Ryan continued asking questions, and Marcus continued responding calmly. The contrast between them became clearer with every moment. One man was searching for information while carrying the weight of an assumption. The other man was waiting patiently because he knew the truth would eventually speak for itself. A few miles away, the rest of the world continued moving normally. People went to work. Families started their mornings. Drivers passed by without realizing that a quiet conversation on the side of the road was revealing something much bigger about human judgment. Marcus looked at the officer and said, "I understand you have a responsibility to ask questions. I only hope the answers are considered before conclusions are made." The words were simple, but they carried the wisdom of someone who had spent decades leading others. Ryan paused for a moment. He was used to people becoming defensive during difficult conversations. He was not used to someone responding with patience and understanding. That difference stayed in his mind. There was something about Marcus that did not fit the picture he had created. The calm voice, the respectful attitude, the confidence without arrogance. These were qualities that could not be explained by a simple traffic record. As Ryan checked additional information, a small detail appeared that made him stop. The name connected to Marcus's identification seemed familiar, but he could not immediately place it. He looked again, wondering if there was something he had missed. Marcus noticed the hesitation but remained silent. He knew moments like this often revealed more than arguments ever could. Because sometimes the truth does not arrive through a confrontation. Sometimes it arrives through one small detail that forces everyone to look again. And that detail was about to open a door to a story far greater than a traffic stop on a Virginia road. The small detail on the screen changed the atmosphere inside the patrol vehicle. Officer Ryan Mitchell looked at the information again, this time with a different expression. The name in front of him was not just another entry in a database. There was something connected to it, something that suggested a history far beyond a simple traffic stop. He paused, trying to understand why the information felt familiar. Marcus Caldwell remained where he was, watching quietly through the window. He could see the moment when curiosity started replacing certainty. It was a moment he had witnessed many times during his years of service. The moment when someone realized there was more to a situation than what appeared on the surface. Ryan continued checking the available details, but some information required additional confirmation. The system showed that certain records were connected to official military channels. It was not the kind of information that could be quickly explained by a simple search. Marcus noticed the hesitation but did not interrupt. He understood the importance of allowing proper procedures to take place. After all, his entire career had been built around following processes designed to protect accuracy and responsibility. During his years as an Army general, Marcus had taught others that good decisions came from patience. Leaders who acted too quickly often missed important details. Leaders who listened carefully usually found the truth. Now, on the side of a Virginia road, he found himself watching someone else learn the same lesson. Ryan looked at Marcus again. The person sitting in front of him did not act like someone trying to hide something. There was no frustration, no attempt to avoid questions, only patience. That made the situation more difficult for Ryan, because it challenged the assumption he had formed earlier. The officer had expected resistance, but instead he found cooperation. He had expected uncertainty, but he found confidence. He had expected an explanation, but he found a person who seemed comfortable allowing facts to speak. "Is there something else you need from me?" Marcus asked calmly. Ryan hesitated before answering. "I am just verifying a few details." Marcus nodded. "That is understandable." The response was simple, but it carried a level of respect that Ryan did not expect. Marcus was not trying to make the officer feel embarrassed. He was not trying to use his position to gain control of the situation. He was showing the same leadership principles he had practiced for decades. As Ryan continued the verification process, another notification appeared. The information suggested that the identity connected to Marcus required confirmation through a higher level of authorization. The officer stared at the screen for a moment. He realized this was no longer a routine question. There was a reason the system was protecting access to certain records. Nearby, the road remained busy. Cars continued passing. People continued their mornings without knowing that something significant was happening beside them. A quiet man with a lifetime of service was being evaluated by someone who had not yet understood the full story. Marcus looked toward the horizon and remained patient. He knew that truth did not always arrive immediately. Sometimes it moved slowly through official channels. Sometimes it required the right person to make the right call. But when it arrived, it had the power to change everything. And somewhere beyond that highway, the information about General Marcus Caldwell was beginning to reach the people who knew exactly who he was. The information request moved beyond the local system, and Officer Ryan Mitchell could feel that the situation was becoming something he had not expected. The message on his screen was clear. Additional verification was required through official military channels. For a moment, he simply looked at the details in silence. The confidence he had carried at the beginning of the traffic stop began to fade, replaced by questions he could no longer ignore. Marcus Caldwell remained calm inside his vehicle, watching the officer carefully. He did not know exactly what Ryan was seeing on the screen, but he understood the change in the officer's expression. It was the same moment when assumptions began to meet reality. Ryan stepped away from the vehicle and made the necessary request for further confirmation. He followed the process because that was what his training required. But this time, the process was leading him somewhere unexpected. He was no longer trying to confirm a simple detail. He was trying to understand why the person in front of him had information connected to a level of service far beyond an ordinary interaction. Marcus looked out at the passing cars and remembered something he had learned during his years in the army. A leader never rushes toward an answer just because it is convenient. A leader takes the time to understand the complete situation. That lesson had guided him through decades of responsibility, and it guided him now. He knew that revealing his rank might end the conversation quickly. He knew that mentioning his position could change Ryan's attitude immediately. But Marcus believed something important. People should not show respect only after discovering someone's title. Respect should begin before the title is known. Ryan returned to the vehicle, holding his phone in his hand. His voice was quieter than before. "There seems to be some additional information that requires confirmation," he said. Marcus nodded. "I understand." The response was simple, but it made Ryan pause. Most people would have been frustrated by the delay. Most people would have tried to explain themselves repeatedly. Marcus did neither. He remained patient because he trusted the truth. As the verification process continued, another notification appeared. The system indicated that the information connected to Marcus was associated with a senior military record. Ryan read the message carefully. The name on the screen was becoming more familiar. He searched again, looking for more context. Then he saw it. The connection was not accidental. The person sitting in front of him was linked to a military history that carried significant recognition. Ryan took a step back, trying to process what he was seeing. The man he had viewed as a routine traffic stop was connected to years of leadership and service. Nearby, the morning continued as usual. People drove along the highway. Businesses opened. Families continued their daily routines. Nobody around them realized that a quiet conversation was revealing a truth that would completely change the meaning of the moment. Marcus remained composed because he knew this was never about proving he was important. It was about allowing the facts to exist without being ignored. Ryan looked at the screen one more time, then looked back at Marcus. For the first time since the traffic stop began, he was not looking at an ordinary driver. He was looking at someone whose life story was much larger than he had imagined. And the next confirmation would come from a place that would leave no room for doubt. The confirmation process that began on the side of the Virginia highway was about to reveal a truth that Officer Ryan Mitchell never expected. He stood quietly beside his patrol vehicle, holding the information in his hands while the reality of the situation slowly became clear. The name connected to the record was not just a name. It represented decades of service, leadership, and commitment to the United States Army. Marcus Caldwell was not simply a driver on the road. He was a general whose career had been built on responsibility and dedication. For a moment, Ryan said nothing. The certainty he had carried earlier was replaced by reflection. He thought about the first few minutes of the traffic stop, the assumptions he had made, and the conclusions he had reached before understanding the full picture. Marcus watched from inside the vehicle and noticed the change. He did not look for an apology. He did not expect embarrassment. He understood that the most important moments were often the ones when people had the chance to learn from their mistakes. Ryan finally approached the vehicle again, but his tone had changed. The confidence from earlier was gone. In this place was a more careful respect. "General Caldwell," he said, acknowledging the truth that had finally been confirmed. Marcus looked at him calmly and nodded. He did not react with pride or satisfaction. He simply accepted the moment. To him, the title was not what mattered most. The person behind the title mattered more. Ryan looked at the information again. He saw the history connected to Marcus's name. He saw years of military leadership and service that existed long before this traffic stop. He realized that the man he had been questioning had spent a lifetime carrying responsibilities that most people would never experience. Yet Marcus had never used that history to demand special treatment. That was the part Ryan found most surprising. The general had every opportunity to reveal his position at the beginning. He could have changed the entire situation within seconds. But he chose not to. He chose to let the process happen. He chose patience over influence. Marcus looked toward the road and spoke calmly. "A person's rank can tell you what they have achieved. It does not tell you everything about who they are." Ryan listened carefully. Those words stayed with him because they reflected something deeper than this one interaction. The issue was not only about a traffic stop. It was about how quickly people could form opinions without understanding the full story. Around them, the sounds of everyday life continued. Cars moved along the highway. People continued their morning routines. The world did not stop, but the meaning of that moment had changed completely. Ryan had approached the situation believing he was dealing with someone who needed to explain himself. Instead, he discovered someone who had spent a lifetime proving himself through actions, not words. Marcus remained respectful because he understood something important about leadership. True leaders do not need to announce their importance. They show it through patience, humility, and the way they treat others. And on that quiet Virginia road, Officer Ryan Mitchell learned a lesson that would stay with him long after the traffic stop ended. Sometimes the person who appears ordinary is carrying a story extraordinary enough to change the way everyone sees the world. The morning on the Virginia highway had changed in a way that nobody nearby could have predicted. What started as a simple traffic stop had become a moment of reflection for Officer Ryan Mitchell and a reminder of the importance of seeing people beyond first impressions. Marcus Caldwell remained calm throughout the entire experience, But he understood that the situation represented something larger than one conversation between two individuals. It represented the difference between authority and leadership. Ryan stood beside his patrol vehicle, looking back at the information that had changed his understanding of the situation. He thought about how quickly he had created a picture of Marcus before knowing the full story. He had focused on the moment in front of him instead of the lifetime behind it. That realization was difficult because it required honesty. It required admitting that experience and confidence were not always enough to guarantee a correct judgment. Marcus had seen this kind of reflection before. During his years in the army, he had taught younger leaders that accountability was not about avoiding mistakes. It was about having the courage to recognize them and improve. A person could not become a better leader by pretending they were always right. They became better by being willing to learn. Ryan looked at Marcus differently now. He no longer saw only a driver during a traffic stop. He saw a person who had spent decades serving the country, leading others, and carrying responsibilities that extended far beyond himself. But what surprised Ryan most was Marcus's attitude. The general had not used his position to embarrass him. He had not demanded special treatment. He had not attempted to turn the situation into a personal victory. Instead, Marcus had shown the same qualities that made him a respected leader: patience, discipline, and respect. "I appreciate your understanding," Ryan said. "This situation could have gone very differently." Marcus nodded. "Every situation gives us a chance to learn something." Those words stayed with Ryan. They were simple, but they carried the wisdom of someone who understood that leadership was not about having power over others. It was about using responsibility in the right way. As the conversation continued, Marcus explained that his military service had taught him an important lesson. A uniform, a title, or a position could tell people what someone had done. But those things did not automatically reveal a person's character. Character was revealed through choices, especially during moments when emotions were tested. Ryan thought about the beginning of the traffic stop. He remembered how certain he had been. He remembered believing that he already understood the situation. Now he realized that certainty without understanding could create mistakes. The highway around them remained busy. People continued driving past, unaware of the lesson taking place on the roadside. But for Ryan, the moment would become something he remembered for years. It was not because of the general's rank. It was because of the humility Marcus showed when he had every reason to act differently. Marcus eventually prepared to continue his journey. Before leaving, he looked at Ryan and offered one final thought. The responsibility that comes with authority is not just enforcing rules. It is making sure people are treated with fairness. Ryan listened carefully. He knew those words would remain with him, because that day, he learned that true leadership was not always found in the person holding the badge. Sometimes it was found in the person who had every reason to be angry, but chose to respond with dignity instead. The Virginia highway was quiet again as Marcus Caldwell prepared to continue his journey. The traffic stop that had begun with uncertainty had ended with something far more meaningful than a simple conversation. It had become a reminder that every person carries a story, and that story cannot always be seen from the outside. Marcus returned to his vehicle with the same calm expression he had carried from the beginning. His rank had been confirmed. His service had been recognized. But none of that changed the person he was. He was still the same man who believed that respect was not something to demand. It was something to give. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained beside the road for a moment, watching Marcus drive away. The experience stayed with him because it challenged something deeper than his understanding of one situation. It challenged the way people sometimes create conclusions before knowing the complete truth. Ryan had always believed that being confident was part of being effective. But now he understood that confidence needed to be balanced with humility. A person could have experience, training, and authority, but still make mistakes if they stopped listening. Marcus had shown him that leadership was not about proving who had more power. It was about recognizing the responsibility that came with that power. Later that day, Ryan found himself thinking about the encounter again. He remembered the patience Marcus showed during every question. He remembered how the general could have ended the situation immediately by revealing his position, yet he chose not to. That decision mattered. It showed that Marcus did not measure his worth by his title. He measured it by his actions. For more than 3 decades, Marcus had served in the United States Army. He had carried responsibilities that most people would never know. He had made decisions that affected others. He had guided people through difficult moments. But after everything he had accomplished, one of his strongest lessons came from a quiet roadside conversation. It reminded everyone that true honor does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it waits patiently for the chance to be understood. The story of that morning traveled beyond the highway, not because Marcus wanted attention, but because moments of fairness and reflection often leave a lasting impact. People who heard about the encounter remembered the importance of looking beyond appearances. They remembered that a person's value cannot be measured by assumptions made in a few seconds. Marcus continued living the same way he always had. He did not seek recognition from strangers. He did not need a title to prove his character. His life had already demonstrated what commitment and service meant. And for Ryan, the lesson remained clear long after the traffic stop ended. A badge can represent responsibility, but it does not give someone permission to stop seeing the humanity of others. A rank can represent achievement, but it does not define the entire person. In the end, the moment was never only about a police officer and a general on a Virginia road. It was about something much bigger. It was about the choice every person has when meeting someone they do not fully understand. They can judge quickly, or they can take the time to listen. Because sometimes the person standing quietly in front of you is carrying a lifetime of courage, service, and sacrifice. And sometimes the greatest lesson comes when the truth finally reveals what was there all along.